Once again, it's another Monday night, and welcome to another episode of AN Imperfect Union. Tried to get the music to play tonight. We couldn't. I think it's Mark. I think you jinxed my music. Your lights went out, my music went out, but that's all right. We'll get this show on the road, man. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be back on your show. It's one of my favorite things.
Oh man, I've actually been on a few shows up in your area on Saturday mornings. The Some of the gentlemen that I've invited in on the show are also from Minneapolis, and I really didn't know, but tonight is an all Minneapolis show. I actually had a couple all Minnesota Minneapolis shows during this month just because of the importance of the region. And it seems like a lot of people in your city more are willing to talk. I'll put it like that, and try to talk about solutions as well as problems and some of the things that can be done. First of all, let's kind of get our audience reacquainted. Mark, what do you do, and what is your connection with the Twin Cities? Even though you did, I noticed on your Facebook page that you moved from Milwaukee to the Twin Cities.
And I did. I'm from Wisconsin. I've lived in the Twin Cities now longer than I've lived in Wisconsin, Milwaukee. As we've talked about before, I'm a diehard Packer fan, but I also love my Twins. I think the fact that this is the second time now that I've been on with an all Minneapolis group on your show, I think that maybe there's a higher power saying that you should be moving to Minneapolis. And
no. I moved out here from Pittsburgh, and that was cold enough. No. I'm too old to really enjoy, snow sports and things like that. So, in spite of the fact that you have, all the lakes up there, I still prefer the ocean.
Okay.
But before we get down to the serious stuff, what's going on with Aaron, man? Is Aaron going to be attacking next year, or is he going to be throwing the ball in Denver? I got a sports show on Thursday night, so inquiring minds want to know.
I think the Packers should. First of all, this is a repeat now. He chased Mike McCarthy out. Is he just this Adonis? I think it's time to get rid of him and get some great draft picks. I wish they'd bring Kyle Kaepernick to Green Bay, but I don't think he's going to be who he was. Even if he comes back and they settle this, I don't see him being the Aaron Rodgers of the past 2 years because of this shadow now over him. I mean, every year I care less and less about football. And this is just kind of persona, but I think the Packers are going to come with a sweet deal, making him the highest paid quarterback in professional football. They're going to work it out, and I think he'll have a mediocre year. It's kind of how I see this working itself out.
So you think they're going to give him more money for a mediocre year?
That's what I see happen. He'll be like Kirk Cousins.
Oh, yeah. Somebody has to eat that $34 million tag, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you can't plug your Packers without talking about your Twins. So the baseball season's just starting, just getting hot. My Yankees are finally starting to hit the ball. I didn't know what was going on these first few weeks, but how's your Twins doing?
I think they're struggling. And, I'm loyal to the end with my Twins. And I don't think, I haven't been following. There's been so much news in Minneapolis. And, in Minnesota, obviously, as I say all the time, all roads lead to Minneapolis, Minnesota, that I haven't been as following sports as I have in the past. I'm too busy watching trials and juries and one thing I was going to bring up later when you were talking about if things have changed is the all-white church that's opening in western Minnesota, and the kind of the drama that's, but they're calling themselves an all white church, and they're going to be opening.
Well, maybe we should talk about that first here, considering that a lot of people that watch this program know my views on religion, and how I think it's kind of gotten off track. No such thing as separation of church and state. We might as well be run by the Vatican or some other Pentecostal group, or I'm not sure whether we're evangelicals, Pentecostals. I don't know anymore. But anyway, can you tell me a little bit more about this concept of an all-white church?
Well, it's white supremacy in a small
Okay.
rural farming town, and the thing, and that I expect white supremacy. I've grown to see it and not accept it, but I expect that it's going to happen. What I didn't expect is this small little farming town in the middle of nowhere in western Minnesota, a community rising up saying we don't want this crap in our community, and 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 that's warmed my heart to see a small town where the racism is typically more prevalent saying no, we don't want this. We don't want you skinheads in our community. And now the church unsuccessfully filed an injunction against the leaders of the opposition. They filed an injunction in court against the community that's been fighting them, and it got thrown out, saying that it did not meet the grounds for an injunction, and the battle's on, and and they I don't know how it's going to play out, but I got to say it warms my heart to see a small farming community many miles from the city here, from Minneapolis, St. Paul, standing up saying, we don't want this crap in our community. Um, and so, as bad as the whole concept is, the concept's alive and well and all over, not well, but all over the place. But the fight back on it is unique and refreshing. And I hope that becomes contagious. And every community says, we don't want this crap in our community.
I find two things kind of heartwarming about that because one of the I have another gentleman that comes on. He's ran for office, and he's from Indiana. And when you talk about a lot of the rural community in Indiana, it has become a part of the fiber of this white supremacist type organizations. Of course, Indiana has had a long history of being involved with the Klan as well as some of the other states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, uh, and as we're speaking about, your state, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I think that's another thing that really a lot of Americans don't realize. When we think of prejudice and racism and things like that, we automatically tend to think of the South. We think of Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. But Minnesota and Wisconsin have history that would rival either one of them.
James, and I've been saying this for years, long before Derek Chauvin came to light, is the only difference between Minneapolis and down south. Is down south you could recognize them because they wear those stupid sheets and head costumes. Where in Minnesota they love to wave an equity flag, talk about diversity, and then stand up and secretly try to keep children of color outside of their kids' school. It's the only difference is you can recognize them down south because they wear those ridiculous costumes. It's Minnesota, Wisconsin, horribly racist communities. And I don't know if you do this or not, but I have now an adult son, my youngest 18-year-old. He's adopted, African American child. He's black. And and so the fear goes in my heart when he drives his car. It's I don't it's there's fear in my heart, fear that I'll never know personally, that obviously you'll know personally, but this is a horribly racist community. I served on the school board for 5 years here in a Twin Cities suburban area. So I was an elected official. And that's when I would first really opened my eyes to thinking, my goodness, is this a racist community? My goodness. And they wave equity flags, and they talk about diversity, and then they don't want kids of color in their kids' school. It's crazy, but that's the truth.
Yeah, like I said, I was very surprised, and it's just since my involvement with the community that I really come to realize that how much different my concept of Minnesota was, other than the actuality. Because I mean, uh, like I said, I've talked to some people in Milwaukee, and then talking to people in Minnesota, and I'm like, wow, did this just go over my head? I mean, was this one of the things that we just assumed because it was north of the Mason-Dixon line? I'm still kind of wrap my, knowing that the history of Wisconsin and Minnesota. Uh, you can go back to the Civil War as far as Minnesota. I'm not so much far as Wisconsin, but Minnesota, did have some uh, Confederate militia that were involved. But I still, like you say, when you see Minnesota, you see people, with these flags and talking about inclusion and whatnot. But then when you get down to the facts, when you think of just 6 police being indicted in the last 50 years, and 3 of them are from Minnesota.
Absolutely. And for the most part, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, St. Cloud, progressive cities. But once you get out of those little bubbles, which really is the majority of the state, I mean, you travel 50 miles out of the Twin Cities and you're still seeing Trump, President Trump, gag me just saying that. Milwaukee. I mean,
You can say 45. Right?
okay, 45. Milwaukee, talk about a segregated city. My goodness, is that a segregated city? You have your different sections of the city. I mean, and it's been a while since I've lived in Milwaukee, but what a segregated city that is. Minneapolis, St. Paul, not so much as segregated, but yes, and once you leave the Twin Cities, I mean, you're in the deep South. It's what it is. Minnesota is very red, and then you have the bold patches of blue in the Twin Cities, Duluth, St. Cloud. But this isn't the great Minnesota nice that the community loves to say. And as evident, and I know we're going to talk about Derek Chauvin, but he's been kneeling on people's necks. Another accusation came out. He's been kneeling on necks of young black men and older black men for years.
For years.
Right. What's changed now is that people have cameras. That's the only thing that changed.
That's the same thing I always say, like, what's the difference between the news now and 5 years ago? iPhone 10.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some other things before we get into Chauvin and that, because another thing that we've seen a decrease in vaccines in Minnesota also. But over this weekend, TSA says that they've had a record number of people go through the airlines. So, what are your thoughts on flying? And the vaccine. Do you think And I guess we might have, just for shits and giggles, we could throw in vaccine passports.
You know, and I was vaccinated the very second I could be. I didn't
Me
hit.
too. Me
Yeah,
too.
and I'm all in favor of vaccine passports, and I have no issue with business saying you have to be vaccinated to walk in private businesses. I think they have that right. Now, I don't know completely, and I booked my first plane ticket in a year, but it's not till Thanksgiving. Um, but I haven't flown in a while, and I'm more comfortable flying now. But I think the surge in airfare might have more to do with the fact that everybody's vouchers were expiring, and the airlines were kind of saying, use it or lose it. That could be part of the surge for that's happened over the this past few weekends. I don't think all of it, but I think the airlines need to get realistic with those vouchers and either extend them or refund them. Because apparently it's billions of dollars of vouchers over there. So I think that might have something to do with the increased travel. But Minneapolis, Hennepin County has had a very high rate of vaccinating people, which I'm very proud of. And I wear my mask in public. I still get annoyed when I see people not wearing their mask in public. Um, but I think that could be a part of that. And, once we hit that, herd immunity, and hopefully, COVID-19 will fall in the history books with, the plague and smallpox, things will get completely back to normal. But I'm not completely convinced that the increased travel has to do with people's comfort level versus the airlines kind of being selfish and greedy with those vouchers for the canceled flights.
Well, let's kind of take it a step further, because you were talking about black and brown children, and we're talking about going back to school. I think Pfizer has just just got something from the FTC saying that they can vaccinate 12 to 15-year-olds, and that I didn't really have a problem with that part of it, but uh, when you hear that 30% of the population is just saying that they're not going to take the test, period. How does that translate to you having a university age son?
Well, I have two, and I have I have a daughter. My son's a senior in high school. My daughter's a junior at the university. It's disturbing, and our most recent president. I think we had Obama, we had Biden, the one that kind of filled as real presidents, the one that filled the seat in between. He's hurt the cause, and he went and got his vaccine in secrecy. So all his followers are like, "Well, I'm not going to do that," and then uh, it's part of the problem, and the world will never be the same. Just like after 9/11, the world was never the same, and I think public education will never be the same. But the fact that people aren't getting it, they're talking about, well, the tracking device. Well, this is the tracking device, because I go to Menards and my phone tells me, "How'd you like Menards?" I have my tracking device already. Um, it's ludicrous. Just as we get flu shots, just as we get measles shots, just as we wipe polio off the face of the earth, it's this weird Q conspiracy, idiot Trump people that are keeping are slowing down the progress.
Most definite. In the last few minutes that we have here, let's talk a little bit about George Chauvin. We did talk, about his record. George, Floyd was not his first victim. There was also a report of him with a young boy. I believe he was 14 or 17, something like that.
14.
14.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the verdict? and
Oh,
how like now they're asking for a new trial. You have the judges talking about well, Maxine Waters' remarks might lead to a new trial, to an appeal. I mean, it certainly sounds like even though he was convicted, the judge might not have quite been on board.
I don't think. I think there's too much. I mean, what did I think about the verdict? This fat guy did a backflip. I did not expect guilty of on all counts. I thought there would be a compromise. Now, when that juror started going off on every talk show, I remember saying he is going to create problems. And I was correct. He created problems. He wanted to be on that jury, and then he wanted the publicity of being on that jury. And I don't know what Maxine Water was thinking, but she wasn't thinking. I think now, so this 14-year-old, you know, the he walked into the kid's house. The mom called the kid. It was a big kid. It wasn't like a 14-year-old, like a normal
Right,
14-year-old.
right.
It was a 6'3" large 14-year-old. Obviously, he was African American. Otherwise, Chauvin would have given him a trip to Disneyland, or he went to. But he walked in the house. He hit him with his flashlight. Kid went down. He put his knee on the back of his neck for like 12 minutes. And then his report talks about how the kid was violent and attacking and threatening. And the body camera showed completely different. I mean, Chauvin is a liar and a thief. And what I would guess would happen is they're going to say, let this go, or we're going to go after you on that one. And now the federal civil rights is going to be coming up. I don't think he's going free. He shouldn't go free. He should never go free. I mean, he'll probably go free in 25, 30 years, but I don't think he'll get a new trial. And if he does, then I hope it opens the door to that 14-year-old as well. And instead of getting 15 to 20 years, which is what I'm expecting he'll get 30 to 40 years, plus the another 10 or 15 federal.
Well, as long as they don't run it consecutive, but I am glad to see that that the feds are getting involved, and we'll see what goes on from there. Now, this next question might be kind of a loaded question because
I'd expect nothing less from you.
I'm asking this to you as a member of the white majority in this case, okay? Because I've already kind of disposed, everybody knows my displeasure with Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and the like of them, uh, because I think they take and they don't give. But from your point of view, has the presence of Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, Jesse Jackson, all of those people that you see on the news every night, has it really made an impact locally?
I don't think so. I've never been I've never been a big fan of any of those guys, and I think they're more about themselves than the message. Um, so I don't think they. I mean, I think they brought peace to the family. At least Al Sharpton, that the celebrity was there supporting him. I don't think he did anything, and that's my opinion as a white person who I've been to Cup Foods a few times. I've been to Brooklyn Center Police Station four or five times, um, and but I have not see. I don't see them unifying the community. I really don't. I think they, and this is my opinion, but they appear to me to be more self-interest than the greater good.
And getting back to the area, because I don't really know that much about Brooklyn Center, but when you look at the area that, with the reaction to George Floyd, you also look at what happened, as I said, in Brooklyn Center to, the cop that mistook her gun for a taser. Um, how are things in your town right now? As far as relationships between uh, the police and the black community and your concerns having young men of color as a part of your family. You
I don't.
already spoke about like him driving, so I mean,
Mhm.
I can definitely relate to driving while black. My color never changes, so
Yeah.
but
I think, after the things were very tense leading up to the verdict. Businesses were boarded, people were on edge. I think everybody was anticipating the worst. And then all of a sudden there was this calm, this extreme calm. The board started coming off and people were celebratory. Um, in the middle of it, Kim Potter, a 20 some year veteran, mistook her taser for a gun. Um, or other way around, and killed, in cold blood, killed a young man. Um, things are calm right now, and they're peaceful. But I don't see any difference. I mean, I live in a community called Plymouth, Minnesota. It's maybe 30% diverse. And the last I checked, which out of fairness, it's been over a year, 100% white police force. And I went round and around with the police chief on this. And, 100%, 69 police officers. I think there was 7 or 8 women, 100% white. Zero effort to diversify. And, while obviously, the Minneapolis Police Department isn't the same diversity, but I don't see things better. I simply don't. Minneapolis has one of the lowest paid police departments in the area, and it's reflective on the fact that they're killing people. It's reflective in their behavior. St. Paul has one of the highest paid police departments, and oddly enough, those police officers aren't randomly killing people. It's there. There's huge issues, and I don't see it. I don't believe George Floyd died in vain. I think good will come of this. But I don't. But it's a slow moving boat. I mean, we've come a really short way since Martin Luther King, had a dream. We haven't come that far. And meanwhile, we sit back and we pointed our finger at South Africa for apartheid, and then we kill people in the streets. It's crazy. I don't see the relationship getting any better, but I think awareness is higher. I think the police are on more guard that they can't do this. And the fact that the Minneapolis police chief, I mean, God bless that guy for standing on trial. I think the first time ever and saying what he did was wrong. I mean, that was huge that the police chief of Minneapolis stood up and said that you can't do that. Like, you were in the wrong. But I don't see it getting better, and I don't know how to fix it.
that's that's kind of the problem, the fix, because I mean, do you when we talk about diversity in the police department, if we talk about reform, however we talk about it, uh, is there any way that you could fix the problem without getting rid of the current police department? Regardless of, I mean, because I think that you can't start fresh if you still have the same administration. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in the administration is corrupt or anything like that, but I think that if you're going to involve any trust, you have to start over, because the first thing that anybody is going to mention, well, so and so is still a hangover from such and such. So and so got a job because they knew such and such. What do you think about that when it comes to diversity in the police department?
Well, the police forces have to resemble the communities, just as the public education has to resemble the communities they serve. It's crazy that they're not. They absolutely have to, and I'm smart enough to know that I don't know the answer. Like, I simply don't know the answer. Maybe Julius, your next guest, will know the answer, but I simply don't. I can help identify that there's a problem, but I don't know the solution.
I brought Julius in, and I'm taking you a little over, Mark. I know that, but I want to try to get a little interplay between the two of you, because I don't know that much about the community. And where did you say you live, Mark?
I live in Plymouth on the New Hope Plymouth border.
Okay, so Julius, are you kind of familiar with that area?
Yep, yeah, I have a couple friends that live out there actually.
Okay, so the diversity between where Mark lives and the area that you participate in, how far away is it, and how far away is it in actual distance, and how far away is it in your actual goals?
Yeah, so I live in the city of Minneapolis. I will probably would say a 20 to 25 minute drive, depending on where you are in the city. So not too far. But I was actually listening before you put my video up, and I think and I even have a friend that lives in Plymouth that's pretty politically active, and so kind of some of the things we've talked about is um, Plymouth getting better at some of the things like policing and whatnot, and how they still have a lot to go in terms of those goals. Police interacting with the community in a positive format. And it was interesting to me because when I was there, we were out in his driveway, and the cops just kind of drove by and waved and said hey and had a conversation with the neighbors right next door. And I thought it would be nice to live in a city where you can do that, and the cops aren't looking at you like I think you might be selling drugs or something, but they're looking at you like you're just a participating member of the community who actually cares about things that are going on and stuff. So I can't speak for Plymouth too much. I only know what I know because of the people I know that live there. But it seems like they're far off, and probably for a lot of negative reasons, but also probably a lot. There's probably a lot of positive that comes even out of those negative. Like there's less African Americans and Hispanics in Plymouth, and so probably the police are less on guard because they're not. They see a white person, they don't think danger, they just think community. Whereas if you saw an African American person or a Hispanic person like myself in Plymouth, you probably think, I don't know if you belong here. So yeah, so it's an interesting. I don't know a ton, but I know from what I've experienced a few times I've been in Plymouth.
Right. And granted, this was 5, 6 years ago, but a friend of mine was leaving my house, and I live in a cul-de-sac, and he went down the street, turned around, and he's black, very dark, very similar to your complexion, James. And he went down the cul-de-sac, turned around, and then all of a sudden a little pickup truck was right on his tail. And then he kind of cut over in front of my house, and the thing lit, and the car lit up. And that's what started my conversation with the police chief. And then, when I complained to this was long before Chauvin, and the police were like, you need to go away. I was like, no, I'm going to stand right here. And then the whole thing with and there was just no justification. And when the sergeant called me, he's like, well, he was driving on the wrong side of the road. And I said, he absolutely wasn't. He absolutely wasn't. Like that's the issue. And that's what started the conversation with the police chief of why do you have, and I believe Plymouth is about 25% diversity. Why do you have a 100% white police force? That's the thing I can never understand.
Have things changed since then, Mark?
I honestly don't know. And that was, Mike Goldstein, he retired a few years ago from the police, and he said, he said, well, people move, he said, they're not applying here. And I said, then recruit. And he said, well, people want to work with, their own kind. And I said, then go recruit a sergeant, a lieutenant, who represents the community, and have him. Then people will be drawn to him. And he said, well, people always move up in Plymouth. And I was like, well, it's time for this to change. Blockbuster, they had their way of doing things too. And, it's time for things to change. I honestly don't know if Plymouth Police has diversified at all. I haven't seen anything but a white police officer in Plymouth, but I also haven't been as in tune to it.
What about your education system? Do you find the same ratio when it comes to teachers of color as opposed to an all-white education system?
I think our district is more diverse than maybe others. It doesn't represent the community. It's the Robbinsdale School District, which is 7 communities. I served on the Robbinsdale School Board for 5 years, and we made such a push for that, for the diversity in education. And that's what I said. It was fought back by the community. And the Robbinsdale district it's a long, thin district. It's not, like most districts, it's not round. It's long and thin. So you have the have-nots on one side, the haves on the other, and there's no, each side doesn't want the other side to intermingle. But I think Robbinsdale district has done an admirable job, not maybe an exceptional job, but of bringing in diversity in the education staff.
Julius, have you noticed any direct change in the educational system in that area?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for Minneapolis, it's been interesting. It's been an interesting year to year and a half. Minneapolis actually has one of the highest. I'm trying to figure out how to word this correctly. It has the highest achievement gap between white and black students in the country, which is crazy considering how liberal of a state technically it is, and the city it is. You're like, you leave it in the liberals' hands, and they just kind of like, whatever. But Republicans wouldn't do much better either, so I guess I can't bash on either side too much. But all I have to say, there has been a lot of talk of how to seriously reform education here in the state, especially, and in the city of Minneapolis specifically, because of the achievement gaps. And so there's this one principal I always point to. Her name is Mari Freisburn. She is the principal at North Minneapolis High School here, which is a pretty well-known high school in the city. And they've actually, PBS made a documentary about her and what she's doing to really change the system here and to show that, these students are worth investing in. And I know her specifically has brought a lot of awareness to the issue of the achievement gaps here in the city. She's very well recognized across the education community, even outside of the state. And, I can't speak directly for public schools here, but even the college that I attended has grown and has had a huge uptick in diverse applicants, Black, Brown, Indian, anything like that. And so if the city's education system is modeled anything after that, then I think they're on a good track. And, kind of like Mark said, it's not exceptional, but it's admirable. Some of the initiatives that the state legislature are taking, some of the initiatives that, our government is taking to, close the achievement gap. And it's not all going to happen at once, but I think that it's getting better, but it's not going at the pace that it should be, considering how far behind they've been for so long.
And when I was on the board, the assistant superintendent was the former principal at North, Dr. Mike Favor,
Yep.
now the superintendent in Roseville. I'm so proud of him. But I remember him saying the biggest issue facing our district right now is the equity gap. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, if I ever was wrong about anything, I hope I'm wrong about this, but once COVID settles, that equity gap is going to be so much bigger. Because some kids got tutors and parents at home helping them, and some kids' parents either were not capable or not able to help them. That equity gap is going to be so much bigger than ever before.
Right, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons for that push to get kids back in school. And I think it's a good push because you're right. Some of these kids even depend on, getting their food from the school, their meals for the day, and so. Yeah, I would agree with that statement. It was getting better before COVID, and I guess even thinking about the implications that COVID has had, I would say I would agree with Mark on that. I think it's going to be a lot worse. There's going to be kids that are going to be way left behind, from the other kids that live right across the river from them. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what that looks like. But I would say, before COVID, Minneapolis was making a good effort, and I would say. After, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but it'll be interesting to see if they can keep those kids up to par with the kids who do have money for tutors and whatnot. So
it's going to take a lot of effort, but I think we took there's going to be a bigger gap than there ever was in my prediction, and I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Julius, I'm going to ask you this kind of the same question that I asked Mark earlier. How do you reform, or how do you reform the police without starting all over completely?
Yeah.
I mean, can you have people from the last regime as a part of the rebuild, or do you really have to start from scratch and build the trust and the department all over again?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a tough question. I've been arguing with myself for this for a long time. I will say, I tend to be a little more conservative on this and say, like, this whole push to defund the police, or completely rebrand and tear down and start all over again the police department here, specifically in Minneapolis. I'm not for it. Minneapolis has, I think, 200 less cops than they did last year, and the violence is up violent crime is almost up close to 100%. I think it's around 80 or 90. I can't remember specifically. But all that to say, Minneapolis is showing that less cops don't equal better interactions, specifically, even like the suburb that borders Minneapolis with Dante Wright. Less cops don't mean less interactions with the police. It's showing that it's actually not beneficial to the city in the sense of crime is not being dealt with. And even one of the things that happened too right after George Floyd was when all the city council members and people came up against the police, they stopped patrolling. They just completely stopped patrolling the cities. And even Dr. McCain, the director of the Institute for Humanity, he lives in the north side of Minneapolis, and he was saying, cops don't even go down my street anymore. A couple times a day I would see them, they don't even go down the street anymore. And so, I like to see both sides. I think that where I'm laying right now is that we need serious reform from the inside out, and I think that means slowly cleaning out the old people who are in charge, because I think it's a culture standard that has to be set in the police department, saying, when we come into this job, we're doing it because we want to protect, not hurt. And I think the chief of police here in Minneapolis started that trend by testifying against Derek Chauvin, and I think that was the right move, and I think that's what is needed. But now is he going to clean out the people who have been in the department under him for 40, 50, 60 years, you know what I mean, and are still there still there thinking the old same ways. I think you need to clean it out. You need to get the old thinkers out and start coming to people who see policing as a community effort alongside the police, not just a community effort. That's a hard question though. I just think it depends on the city. It depends on where you're at. And I think for Minneapolis, less police presence in the sense of feeling like you're in a militarized zone, and more of police interacting with individuals and saying, we're here for you. We're here to help you raise your kids in a way that is conducive of a successful environment. We're here to help you if you need a ride home and you're taking groceries and you have to walk 3 miles. Get in the car, let's take you home. Things like, the small things like that. And so I think the reform really comes from a setting culture of, we aren't the military, we aren't here to just hold law and order, but we're here to show the community that we're here for them. And so, yeah, that's a loaded question, but I guess I'd start with that it's a policing culture thing, that the top down, there has to be trickle down standards that show, okay, we love the community we're serving, and if you don't, get out, go somewhere else. It doesn't matter. And then also like having the support of the people that fund them, council people, the mayor saying, there's a lot of bad apples, but we're going to do everything we can to root them out with policy, with training, making sure that our training efforts aren't, inherently biased towards one group of people. And so, yeah, I think that would be kind of my first thoughts to that. But there's a lot that goes into that, and so I don't know if I'm even scratching the surface.
Mark, he says, there are places that the police don't patrol. They refuse to go into the neighborhoods. Well, being from the East Coast before I move out here, I'm kind of used to that. I lived in Newark for a while, messed around in New York for a little bit, so I'm kind of used to how police can segregate off a neighborhood, for want of a better word, and decide when and what policing is to be done in that area. A lot of them, they'll police during the week, but on the weekends they refuse to go into certain areas just because of the violence. But two things to that. First of all, if you signed up to be a policeman, that's part of your job. So if you're not patrolling the areas that you're supposed to be patrolling in, that's a problem because taxpayers are paying for that. Number two, if you're not, how do you know that if you live in that particular neighborhood, how do you know that you can trust the police when they show up? Mark, I'm going to direct that at you.
And that's part of, that's part of the reason why we need more community policing. We need the police visible, on the streets, in the community centers, at the churches, the synagogues, the mosques, and in the school. We need the police to be, part of the community, so people can trust them. And as I've said several times tonight, I don't know the answer. I do know if that a bad person, was chasing me with a knife or a gun, I'd call the police. I depend on their protection, yet I'm sickened by some of their behaviors. And I don't know the answer, but it's that community policing that, getting so the kids know, who the police officers are, and I never thought, and I, when I think about, growing up in Milwaukee, family in Chicago, the old Cabrini Green neighborhood, like the police never went in there. It's like, is that what's happening now in Minneapolis, that there's areas that police just won't go into? And, and I said, I don't know the answer, but I certainly know there's a problem that has to be addressed and fixed.
Two things that I'd like for you guys to just kind of go over real quick, because out here in California, I will admit that there's very, very little publicity about this. Saturday, I was on the show with Don Allen, and we had the uncle of the young 10-year-old boy that was shot and dropped off at the hospital. And from what I'm understanding, there's also an 11-year-old girl missing from somewhere in Minneapolis. Why is it that, now that, Al Sharpton and the crew has gone, we don't hear about these things anymore? Do you want to start on that one, Jim?
Did you say Julius or Mark? I hope you said Julius, because I don't want to start.
I said Julius.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, throwing the tough questions.
This is not the softball show. I'm sorry.
I was looking for that show. I think I might be in the wrong one. But oh man, that's such a good. I think I have my beef with Al Sharpton and Ben Crump and them. I got a lot to say about those two. And
I don't know how long Mark is going to be here, but we do have quite a bit of time. So,
I think we're all in agreement there.
Yeah, you won't find me saying nothing about them. Although I give Jesse Jackson a little bit of grace because Chicago, we have Chicago connection, but even then I'm like, you're getting there. I don't know. I think like I said, when we were on Don's show a couple weekends ago, I think the biggest thing is that they're in it for their mission is clout, not only for themselves, but to bring, maybe some awareness to issues that don't highlight the negatives of what's going on in the Black community, but what's the negatives that are going on from, the white community or other communities down to the Black community. You know what I mean? So when a white cop shoots a Black guy, they're there because they're like, look at what the white people are doing to us. And to an extent, that is valid, and it is very valid, and it's been going on for generations since the founding of the country. So to an extent, they have a good mission there in the sense that they're trying to bring awareness. Like, we still are not where we should be as a country in terms of equality, equity, fair treatment, for black and whites, and everything in between. But then I think, when it comes down to things like, a 10-year-old kid getting shot in Minneapolis by most likely another minority in the community that's a part of a gang, that's part of, something that's part of doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing with violence, then you're starting to highlight, okay, where are the issues that lie in our communities and how do we solve them in a productive way? And it's almost like you're highlighting the issues that have been going on for a while, not only because of the systemic injustice, but because the leaders like Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and Jesse Jackson only care about those things. So then they don't say, how can we fix the issues in our communities that are not just from systemic racism, but just from, black fathers not traditionally being there in terms of statistics. How are we feeding our children? Are we investing in our own kids? Things like that, where it's like there's a lot that has to do with outside factors, but there's also a lot that has to do with the inside factors of what is the standards we're setting as minorities for each other, especially in the black community, Hispanic community. I'm both. My mom's Puerto Rican, my dad's black, and so I kind of get the best of both worlds in the sense that like I've understood the issues from both perspectives, and it's just Ben Crump, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson don't want to highlight those things because it makes them look bad, and people are going to look at them and say, why are you not in the community starting things that are going to feed black children or give black mothers job skills training or get them their GEDs or college degrees? It's only when a black guy gets shot by a cop, then this systemic injustice. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like we have a lot of that going on, yes, but if you're not willing to invest in your community so that they can start to learn about these things, they can start to push against these things in a systemic way, then what are you really doing? You're just there for a press tour. You're there to maybe help out one family out of the millions of black families here in the United States that really need, a lot of different resources that they have and they're not willing to, give. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of where I would argue that point, but, I'm young, so there's a lot of stuff that I don't know about them that I'm not sure, if they've been doing things that I don't know about, but that from my perspective, that's, what it looks like. So.
Yeah. Well, you're young. You're right. You're the next generation, and that's the reason why we're talking with you and seeing how you're getting involved in this type of activity, because I think we need more young people involved. One of the things that I've been asking, is where are the young black leaders under the age of 30 or under the age of 35? Because we do need, to me, we need the youth to be involved. Mark, I mentioned a 10-year-old, I mentioned an 11-year-old, and, we can't just be all on the news and protesting what's happening in the black neighborhood when it's perpetuated by white police officers. We still have to do our day-to-day living. We still have to, in some cases, survive within these neighborhoods because people can't afford to move out. Sometimes, you have different circumstances. But when it starts to affect the children, don't you think that this is, like, what do they call it? What do they say? A red flag?
I mean, absolutely, and it's painful to watch, and it hurts to see kids going through some of the fear and the turmoil that they're going through, and and I don't know enough about Ben Crump and Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, but it seems and no offense, but it seems like they follow the camera, and and they're about getting the, the
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 Benjamins. The
yeah.
Benjamins. Let's say it like it is. The Benjamins.
Yeah, they're about, and and as horrible as this to say, when Al Sharpton showed up in Minneapolis after the George Floyd's murder, it's like one of the first things that went through my head is I wonder how much money he's getting paid to be here. Um, and I don't know. I think we lost Julian, and I don't know if he got paid or not. But it just seems like it's about, as you said, the Benjamins. It's following the money and the publicity, not about necessarily what's right and what's wrong.
Well, here's another thing that I find very interesting. I don't know whether it escapes most people's attention or it's just something that they just don't want to think about. But the Floyd family, I believe they got $27 million.
Yeah.
Someone took a third of that out of your town. There hasn't been one new community center built. There hasn't been one new job created. At least this is from the outside. Now, maybe you guys know different because you're within the community, but I haven't heard any of that $9 million or so that Ben Crump and them took out of the city. I haven't heard of $1 of it being put back into the city. Your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, and that was really the first thing when I heard that settlement. It's kind of like bittersweet. I'm glad, I want George Floyd's kids to have college paid for and grad school paid for, and not have to worry. But 27 million, think of what that could have done for public education. How many teachers that was, how many community centers that was, how many, we mentioned Minneapolis North High School. It's been years since I've been there, but that was a school that just perpetually needs repair, needs upgrades. It's not in the same condition as Edina High School, which is a wealthier community. It's that money could have done so much good for the community, but you're right. Ben, these guys are coming in, and they're leaving with that money. And I mean, 27 million is a lot that could have gone to so many great things in the city of Minneapolis. But instead it went because Derek Chauvin made a decision to murder George Floyd. I mean, it's, and Brooklyn Center is going to go through the same thing. I don't think it'll be as high, but it's like, boy, the good that money, 27 million. I mean, what a chunk of change that could have served the community in public education and community centers and safe places for children. And it's not there anymore.
I mean, Julius, hey, $9 million, you could have set up a nice neighborhood watch. You could have, whatever diverse programs that you were thinking about starting in, your particular city. $100,000 of that money probably would have went a long way. What's your thoughts on these people coming and taking that kind of money out of your community?
Yeah, I think, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think I'm split down the middle on this. What really bothered me about it was the timing of it during the trial, that it was announced right before they were about to do opening arguments. That really bothered me. I think, though, I think 27 million is a lot of money. I'm like, man, that, that could do a lot for me. Give me $10,000, I'm good, But it's like the small things where it's like, I think Mark's right on that, $21 million is a lot of money. And it's like, the city needs to set a precedent of like, we're not going to take this crap anymore from police, and we want to show that we support our community when things like this happen. But do they need that much money? Probably not. Am I grateful to that family? Am I grateful for that family? Yeah, because, they're going to be set for life. And,
I'm really not worried about the money that the family got.
Right.
I'm worried about the money that these other people got, and took away from the community. At least, and probably the Floyd family is still going to stay in Minneapolis. They'll still contribute to, money to the growth of Indianapolis. But these other people, Al Sharpton, these people are gone.
Right.
community.
Right.
So like I said, I mean, he could have left 90,000, to a food bank,
Right. Right.
or like I said, some type of neighborhood watch or something. I mean, there are numerous things that you can do with $9 million. So
And I think,
I'm
yeah,
not so much concerned about what the money that went to the family. I'm worried about the money that they're taking with them.
right. And that's to Mark's point too. Like they could have done a lot with that. And to the point that we were probably both saying is that where that's what I mean. That's what I was saying. Where were they? Where are they? That money could do so much. You take $1 million. That's like you have $30. You spend $1. You still got $29 left. You got $29 million left. It's like take $1 million of that, invest it back into the communities in which
Right.
these cops are more likely to hurt brown and black kids, and say, listen, we're going to invest so that instead of after school, you're not going out and hanging out with your friends who are selling drugs or gangbangers or doing all this crap and getting influenced. Go to after school programs where they teach you job skills, where they teach you how to do job interviews, where they teach you how to save money, where they teach you how to do, basic things that later in life, invest, things like that. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean when I say I have beef with Al Sharpton and Ben Crump and Jesse Jackson and all that. They don't think about that stuff. They don't think about the long term. They think about how can I get on camera? How can I make my point known? And also to say too, two of these men ran for president. And it's like, what I mean? They're used to being somewhere at the right time and then not long term not fulfilling those ideas and so or the fulfilling that mission. And so, for me it's like you're right, that money could have done a lot. Even just $1 million of it could have changed hundreds of kids' lives by just investing in them long term and thinking, how can I prevent the next situation like George Floyd, even though he had nothing, it wasn't his fault. How can I prevent, another person from, having to be in that situation or being in those communities and with those cops, And so, yeah, it is a hard line to draw. And like I just read a poll a couple years ago says that of people of the black community said that a quarter believe that Al Sharpton speaks for them. So so he has a lot of influence in the black community, and he's not using it. And then they get in this repetitive cycle of this going on, and Al Sharpton shows up, and people are like, "Oh yeah, this is our champion," and then what does he do? Nothing.
The thing of it is that 25% you're talking about are mostly my age,
right?
Senior citizens, because this is a familiar face. But there's a way that these people got in these positions. I mean, Martin Luther King, made himself visible. Malcolm X made himself visible. Huey Newton made himself visible. And of course, most of these people are dead now. But the point that I'm making is that there was a face that people could put with the movement. And nowadays, as a senior citizen, yes, we tend to connect with Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, but we're not the future. We're the past.
Right.
So there's another 75% that has to do some of the work, and like I said, that there has to be someone that's out there. We saw in the Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter movement, where now they're starting to talk about the politics of the women that founded, whether they were Marxists or not, regardless of what the aims of the organization are, but then we also see, on the other side, that as soon as the money starts coming in, everybody wants to get a little piece of the pie. We have Black Lives Matter, and then we have Black Lives Matter national, local. There's no unity. Mark, before I get carried off here, I know you've been on for a while. I'm only going to be on about another 20 or 30 minutes. Do you want to hang out with us, or do you want to let us go?
I still need to run to the store and buy some light
All right,
bulbs
that's right. Okay.
as I'm sitting here in the dark.
Okay. Well, why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening? Tell everybody, where they can find you on social media if you want. And it was good hanging out with you, Mark. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, my claim to fame is the Trump's lies list on Facebook. I have about 10 hours left of Facebook jail time for allegedly making homophobic comments, and which I don't make homophobic comments, just to clear the record. The interesting thing about that was someone was blaming Black Lives Matter for the riots in Minneapolis, and my response to that was, blaming Black Lives Matter is like blaming every God-fearing Christian person for the actions of the God hates fags idiots. And Facebook tagged me because I said the F word, and I got a jail time. But Trump Lies List is one of the pages that I'm a moderator on. And said I live here in the New Hope, Plymouth area, and it's always such a pleasure to be on the show. And I think we just continuously hope for progress, and I just hope it goes faster than it's been going since the I was just talking to a friend the other day how it wasn't that long ago that we looked at South Africa and condemned them for apartheid, and what we do here is we're doing the same thing here. It's like we can't see our own actions, and I think we just need to keep being vocal and believing in change. And it has to come from all three of our generations. All white people have to stand up and support what's going on and realize that we are a community, and we cannot let this continue. So it's always such a pleasure to be on your show, James, and I can't wait to be invited back.
Hey, no problem, Mark. As you know, I post a lot on your page, so
I love it.
It's kind of hard for me to get to. So thank you so much, my man. You go and grab you some light, and I will be in touch soon.
Okay, and in I think it's about 12 hours, I'll be able to be back posting on the page again. So, Julie, it's a pleasure meeting you, my friend.
Oh yeah, it's good to meet you. I'm sure we'll cross paths again soon.
I would look forward to it. Take care, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Mark has an adopted son that's African American, and of course, as you know, he lives in your city. But he was kind of talking about how his the configuration of his particular community, and we were talking about the configuration of communities when it was talking about gerrymandering and voting rights. Have you seen a lot of that in Minnesota?
The Minnesota Senate just passed a bill a week or two ago. It's like a voter ID bill. I've read it through. I don't know that I would, take it as any attempt to gerrymander or to subdue voting rights for people of color, but I can see the implications of it being those things. I think that any party being in control of redistricting, especially this year coming up, is always a Democrat or Republican is always bad because they're trying to get more seats. I don't know if there's been any direct examples. Maybe Mark said something that I'm not thinking of, but I don't know. Here in Minnesota, it's pretty liberal, so I don't know that they do anything that's aggressively trying to restrict voting or things of that nature, or any gerrymandering. Of course, though, it always happens. It doesn't matter, Democrats or Republicans. Gerrymandering for Democrats or in favor of Republicans just depends who's in control. And so, yeah, I can't say that I've seen much of it besides that voting rights or that voter ID bill, which won't pass in the House. But that's pretty much the only attempt I've seen that I can think of at the moment, at least.
Now, I didn't really get a chance to give you an introduction when you came on, but you want to tell us a little bit about some of the work that you do within the area, and are you part of a younger youth organization, or is this mostly independent work on your own?
Yeah. So I am the director of development for an institution called the Institute for Digital Humanity, and so basically we do a lot of digital ethics focused work, privacy, data privacy, third-party data sales, things that affect people on the internet or through the cloud, anything digitally that can affect you in a negative way. We just banned facial recognition technology, which has pretty large implications and negative consequences to people of color everywhere, because the technology is just garbage. And so I kind of do that digital privacy work, digital ethics, stuff of that nature that protect people from big tech and big corporations like Facebook, Twitter, even the government using the internet to track and use stuff. Even during the Trump administration, and this is a quick example of kind of the work that I do. Even during the Trump administration, the HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, run by Ben Carson, unfortunately, for that reason, and being run by him, they implemented a rule that allowed owners to discriminate based off of data that they could buy, and say, okay, you have this data that I can find on the internet that I don't like, so I can say you can't live in this house anymore. And so that's kind of the stuff, and we fought against that and tried to get that overturned, which I think they're working on right now. We weren't able to follow it all the way through because it's just such a long process, but we got that kick started and got other organizations involved, and then it looks like they're about to overturn that, but we'll see what happens. So all that to say, I do anything digital work, and then I'm pretty involved in young Republicans, like the young Republicans here in Minneapolis, in Minnesota in general, because I've found that Republicans here, the younger ones, are actually more drawn to making the Republican Party and politics in general a more inclusive space for people who don't feel represented, maybe by one side or maybe the other. And so I've been pretty involved in that. I've worked on over 8 campaigns already. I've managed 2 of them. And so that's kind of a little bit of work of what I do, but there's a lot more that goes into that. So
Okay, now I have to ask the question: a young Black Republican.
Yeah.
That for as much as I talk about the Republican Party, but I talk about it from 74 years of experience, which is a lot different from the last probably 10 or 15 years that you've actually been involved. But the one thing that you mentioned when you said that young Republicans seem to be more able to listen and to try to advance things, but you still have an old Republican Party that number one insists that the election results were false. As a matter of fact, you're purging one of the daughters of one of the most staunch conservatives that you've ever had.
And you, if you went through my Twitter today, you would see I am livid. So
So I guess my question for you is, if you, like I said, we hear all of these people my age talking, but we don't. As until you said something about it, I really didn't, know what, party you were affiliated with.
Yeah. For a reason, I try to keep it that way.
But then again, whether it's a young Democrat or a young Republican, if we're talking about making progress, then perhaps we do need to find that bridge across. You know, and if it's going to be made, that bridge has to be made by young people like you, because people like me are already pessimistic about the outcome, because you know, I mean, a lot of people, you know, might say that you know, I'm doomsday type of guy, but you know, I was around when they passed, you know, the Civil Rights Bill of 1968. I mean, I might have been in Vietnam in the jungle, but I was still, you know, I mean, I was alive. I was able, you know, to actually vote, mail-in ballot, of course, you know, for the Republic of Vietnam. But my question, I guess, is why don't we see more young people taking the lead? Whereas when we do see young people talking about Getz and the other lady from Georgia, and you know, we've seen, you know, Tim Scott's not really that old, you know, when you comparatively, but they make a lot of asinine statements. I mean, for Tim Scott to say that racism, you know, America is not a racist country. I haven't seen any different, you know, in my 74 years. I mean, you know, pretty much things have either stayed the same or there's been promises made and promises broken. So how do you see young people snatching the gavel from these senile old people like myself?
Yeah, you know, I'll give you some credit. 74 years, you got a lot of wisdom that we need. You know, I think that's what it is, though. For me, it's always been, you know, for the reason I'm involved in the party, specifically the Republican Party, is because I believe in the fundamental values in which it was founded off of. You know, that might not be what they're about now, but you know, when the Republican Party was founded, it was on individual choice and individual liberty, saying that, you know, as an American, the government is meant to just be a platform by which we are all given the same starting point, and it intervenes whenever there's some serious injustice going on, or serious issues that need to be solved. But I think, you know, for me, what I've grown up, and you know, I grew up in a liberal family, so you know, I'm the black sheep by far. But you know, yeah, I'm the black sheep by far. But I think it's, you know, for me, what I've learned is
that's kind of refreshing to hear from a light-skinned brother.
I can say it again. Don't worry. But, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think the next generation, the way we're going to do it best and the way that it's going to work, so that we don't seriously screw some things up for the people after me, is using the wisdom of the people before us. I think, you know, there's some things that your generation got very right and is going well, and there's some things that your generation got very wrong that, you know, we maybe need to work on and, you know, develop as time goes on. And so I think it's about having people like, you know, Tim Scott, or having people like AOC on both sides of the aisle saying, okay, how do we get the information and wisdom from the people who were before us, who know how these things work on a very deep-seated level, but also saying, we have some good ideas too, and we think they're going to work good. How do we implement both so that it's not a fighting for who's better? It's fighting for, you know, older people got some stuff right that we really need to hold on to and keep a part of, but younger people coming along and saying, we have good ideas too, we need to implement them this way because history shows that the way you're doing it is not working. And so I think for young people, it's all about getting involved, learning from the people above them. You know, a lot of people my age have really great ideas and just don't know how to implement them correctly. But there's been older people that have tried it and have figured it out as they go along. And that's in any sector, politics, business, all of that stuff. There's a very fundamental stuff that we need to know that my generation is trying to kind of bypass and say, nah, we know what we're doing. And it's like, no, we don't. We have no idea. I am 21 years old. I have no idea what I'm doing. I got a long way to go before I consider myself a wise person. And so, I think I have good ideas, but I need help getting them to where they need to be. And I think that comes along with people like your age who have seen the world in a different light, who've learned from their mistakes and say, don't do this again because this is what happened. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what I see it is there has to be some sort of partnership between old and young and saying, I've learned, this is what we both learned in our years of life. How do we bring them together to make a more perfect union? So, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking along those lines.
You spoke of something there that has actually been one of my, I don't know whether, pet peeve, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
When you talk about the starting line,
Mm-hmm.
because I've always said that all I've ever wanted was an equal start.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm running a 100-yard dash, don't put me 20 yards behind the
Right.
starter and expect and then say, well, why didn't you win? So how do you see getting everybody to that equal position on the starting line? That seems to have been our problem.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get to start on an equal basis.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends where, like, what part of the, what kind of where we're talking about. Equal starting point. There's a lot that goes into the system that we live in, right? Like system of governance, the systems of the Treasury, the Defense Department, the Secretary of State Department, things like that, and then our school systems, our banking systems, our housing systems, things that we need to go back to the drawing board and say, this isn't working. It's making everyone's lives a lot harder, and it's not creating an equal starting point. I think where it starts is really going into those systems and saying, what is hurting us? Where does the data show that people are not succeeding, Black and Brown Americans aren't succeeding at? What is causing that? And then how do we move along and fix those things? And a lot of that is the old guard of people who are defending those systems. And then a lot of that is just there's deep-seated bias and unconscious bias in those systems that we need to go about. But I think also to getting to an equitable starting point for everyone, getting to an equal platform. And I agree with you on that. I say all the time to people, I don't need a leg up. I just need an equal start because I believe in myself enough to know that I'm going to get where I want to go if I have that equal start. And I'm fortunate enough that I don't think I got that equal start in my schooling and where I grew up, but I still made it to where I wanted to be. And I'm one of the one of the few, maybe there's, and so I think another part of that is really personal stories affect people the most, I think. And so getting to these areas of the country where people are like, we don't really see how it's not an equal playing field, and say, listen, there's redlining laws, there was discrimination, there was things that have been going on that, our education systems don't get funded the same. Things like that, or like, listen, we know you guys have your struggles too, but this has been going on for way too long and it's targeted. So I think a lot of that has to do, and I'm a political guy, so at heart, that's where it lies. I think systemic change through policy is where we're going to have a serious reform, because we're saying, okay, it's no longer legal to restrict someone of a housing loan because of their poor credit score that they have had because of our financial system being unequitable in one way or another. And so I think that's kind of, I don't know if I answered the question entirely, but I think it just stems down to the old people have to get out of the way eventually when we learn how these systems work, and then bring some policy changes in that say, no, we're not doing this anymore because it's hurting individuals. We're not going to fund our schools solely off of property taxes, because we see that, North Minneapolis and I'm trying to think of a rich county in Florida somewhere, the school not funded the same, so the kids are not learning the same things. They're not learning at an equal pace. So yeah, so kind of, that was long, but it's very deep seated, and we need to get to the root of it through policy, through advocacy, and certain things like what Stacey Abrams are doing, where she flipped Georgia because she got people registered to vote and said, "This is who I want to represent me," because they know where I'm at and where I need to be. So and they recognize those issues.
Yeah, one of my pet projects is I'm actually trying to raise 100,000 bottles of water for the voters of Georgia, and it'll all be distributed locally. Of course, I don't want anything about outside agitation and things like that. So we intend to use organizations within the city of Atlanta or the surrounding counties. I do have to ask you another question though, because
Yeah.
this is something that has really I've wondered about because I see it always happening. Why is it easier to recognize problems and to garner allies within other minority groups? And what I'm talking about is like now you see the organizations coming out against Asian hate crimes. Before we saw we aligned ourselves with the LGBTQ community, especially during the shooting at the Pace nightclub, and also immigrants. You can also find various organizations to help immigrants come across the border, and we talked about the DACA program. Of course, Cubans, if they make it to put their feet on American soil, they automatically become American citizens. We've been here over 400 years, and we still have doubts about our citizenship. But in the meantime, how are these other groups able to garner allies and support? And when you start talking about Black lives and Black organizations, you kind of get that, well, my best friend is Black.
Right. Yeah. That's a good question. I think the biggest thing is it's easier to, I think generally in society, in all sectors of society, but even specifically talking about minorities and the struggles that we go through, marginalized people, the easiest thing to do is to go to the people that we associate with, the people that understand what we're going through. So Asians, getting discriminated against specifically in the last year, Black people and Hispanics and Cubans, they all know what that's like because we've all been discriminated against at some point in history and even continuously still are. And so it's easy to identify with those people and say, I know what you're feeling, so let's just gang up together and talk these through and provide, like almost support groups for each other and say, we understand, let's stick together. It's easier to get with people that, are more.
But then those people seem to advance, and we stay in the same. We're still in March up here,
right? And I think that's a part of that has to do with like we, Black people specifically are still in the same place because, it's I don't know. The community gives a lot and doesn't expect a lot in return. You know what I mean? There has to be a point where Black Americans and African Americans have to put themselves at the forefront and say, I get that you guys are having, but we give a lot of money to these other organizations that deal with these other issues. And we need to find a way to say, we're going to be an ally with you, but we're also going to need to see some advancement in our situation before we continue to keep fighting alongside. And I think part of that has to do with, I would say it's easier to gang up with people that understand, but then it's a lot harder to go out and do something about it. And I think that would be not just for African Americans and Black Americans and, it's Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, that, or Hispanics and Asians and Blacks and African Americans, like all have to come to a point where we're like, all right, now it's time to stop saying what's going on, but start changing what's going on by doing something about it. And I think that's the harder part, because then you start to say, I think of a story of a guy, and his name is Daryl Davis. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him. But basically, he's a black man. He started going to KKK rallies, and he would just sit, and he would and he would listen, and eventually he befriended a grand wizard of the KKK, and then that grand wizard eventually left the KKK, and now is like, doesn't affiliate, would consider himself someone who's learning to not be racist, who's learning to be, to see black people as equal. And that took and if you read the story or you watch his TED Talk, that took a lot of time. That took years and years of consistent going back and saying, I understand you think this about me, but this is the truth, and let me show you. And I think a part of that also comes with not pointing the finger and screaming and yelling, but a part of that comes with saying, you're a product of your environment. You are ignorant, you don't know, let me teach you, or let me show you how to fix this, or let me show you how to do this, or think this way. And that requires effort. And I think, I would say for younger people specifically, that is where we lack, is the follow through of, let me actually do something. It's cool to go to rallies, and it's cool to sit in a group of people and shout, say, no justice, no peace. And to an extent that is helpful. But how much more are you willing to go the extra mile to sit down and talk with that person who goes on Facebook and says George Floyd was on drugs, blah, blah, blah. Like he should, he didn't deserve to die, but, he put himself in that situation, things like that, where you go and talk to those people, where you go and get involved in local organizations, where you go and contact your congresswoman and congressman. I think the follow through of actually doing that work is where my generation is lacking, because it's easier to act like victims,
That kind of resonates. One of the guys that was on my program, in fact, I started the program because of him, and he's a conservative, former Army veteran, and he's also a Republican. And one of the things that we constantly go through this our change about is election laws and the status of Black people.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that if we're going to invoke all of these different election laws, consider, and wanting voter ID and different documentation, that the first thing that we should do is that we have to give everybody equal access to the internet. Because most of the time we don't do a lot of things in person anymore, and we don't do a lot of things face to face anymore. Most of the time, if I want to go to the DMV, I have to go on and make an appointment on my computer, and then so forth and so on. Out here in California, of course, you can vote. They mail you a ballot. You can either turn that one in at your voting place, or you can mail it back in. But my point is kind of like, how can we be fair if everybody doesn't have equal access?
Yeah, I don't think we can. I agree with you. I don't think we can be fair if everyone doesn't have equal access. Now, the question I would throw back to you, and I guess I would pose, because I'm not entirely sure what the solution is to that, is everyone...
Right now you have Biden's infrastructure bill, which is also supposed to provide broadband, but people are saying that infrastructure is only bridges and tunnels and things like that. Whereas I think, for the future of our country, this is also essential.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree. I think broadband and access is essential. I wonder, who's responsible? Here's my question, and this is why I'm struggling to answer. Whose responsibility is it to provide that equal access to everyone? there has to be some community buy-in in the sense that there has to be some investment from community members, I think, because when you invest in something, then you really care about the outcome of it. And then you're really like trying to see it through so that you're using this, you are gaining this, and it's an investment on my end because I put my tax dollars into it. I put my personal funds into it. So
Well,
how much?
why not matching funds like we do for our roads and highways?
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, there has to be some community investment, as in like people in my community need to put some money into it so that they understand the value and appreciate it more. And then, so that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering how, as Americans, do we encourage buy-in to the mission, buy-in or investment into what we're trying to achieve, and how does that look? And then where does the government come in and say, okay, this is how much we're going to allot, this is what we're going to do, so that it doesn't feel like it's just a handout, but it feels like an investment into the community. And that's where I would struggle and say, I don't know what that looks like. Now, communities like North Minneapolis or Compton, maybe, in California, are going to need a lot more on the government end, or, some private sector to come in and say, we're going to fill the gaps because of the financial disparities. But, maybe more wealthy communities that are still maybe not as equal, how do we get them to invest in others and their own community? So, that's where I would say I'm not sure what that looks like on a practical level and on an investment level, what that would look like. But I think I would agree and say that there needs to be those things that give equal access to everyone. Because you're right, infrastructure, I would say, is internet access and is investment in community access to information. You can learn literally my whole 4-year degree, you could probably learn on Google, so, and it's true. So it's like, how are we giving, if for the kids that can't afford to go to college, can they go to a community cafe with free computers and learn all this information and teach themselves? And so yeah, I agree with that statement. I think everyone needs equal access, and it is an investment, but what that investment looks like on both ends for the value of it and the buy-in is where I would say I'm not sure what that looks like.
Well, I mean, America is kind of a country that, builds it first and then asks later. I mean, just like we did with the internet. We invented the internet, and now it's worldwide. We still control a big portion of it, but once again, the access, the information is there. People have to be. I think give them access to it, and how they interpret it or how they use it, that's up to them. But at least make sure that they have equal access.
Right, and I agree. That's what I mean about traditional conservative values, in the sense that's why I'm a Republican, because I believe we need to put those investments there for the community, because then we can say we've given you an equal playing field. Now what you do with it is your choice.
Right.
And
right.
There's always going to be those gaps that need to be filled, but if we have to rely on the government for everything, we're doing something wrong, because we as humans have the willpower to do what we want to do. I'm a firm believer, and especially because of my story so far to this point, that you can do anything you set your mind to when you have an equal playing field. And so when you're right, when we put people on that platform of, okay, everyone starts the same, you're going to start to see a lot more Black investors, Black entrepreneurs, Hispanic investors, Hispanic entrepreneurs, scientists, government officials that are going to be more successful and that are going to be at the forefront. And then it won't be the conversation of why are we at the eye? It's going to be at the conversation of look at what we can do, So
right, because a lot of people are going to succeed just on sheer will and grit. Everybody is not that far above intellectually an Einstein or something like that. But people do have their own type of their own particular set of skills. Right. And if you let them develop and use those set of skills, it can benefit society. I'm going to let you go, man. I know you're 2 hours ahead of me. It's only 8 o'clock here, so
Yeah.
so I'm going to let you go, man. I'm sorry Anthony didn't get a chance to jump on with us. I'm going to have Marvin on next week. He had a family situation, but I'm so glad you were able to join. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I, you know, like I said, if you come on here, I don't throw a lot of softballs, man, but
No,
we
I
generally,
appreciate it.
but we generally do have some very interesting conversations.
Yeah, and I
So,
listen. Anytime you give me the invite back, I'll be here. I love it. I got a future political career. I got to get prepared for those hard reporters are going to come after me. So you're the best for that.
yeah, I'll be part of your campaign. You let me know what you want to do. I don't even know, and that's hard for me to say, a part of the Republican campaign. But that's all right. We'll see how that works out. I am
Yeah,
open to change. One of the things that the service told me is that you have to be able to improvise.
yeah,
Regardless of the situation. So, uh,
yeah.
you know. So why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening? Tell everybody where they can find you on social media, and I look forward to talking to you again, young man.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for it. And like I said, whenever you want me, I'll be here. I love coming on. But yeah, I mean, I just say this. I really believe in the direction that our country is going. I think we're making positive change. I think that people like you who've been around for a while have really set the groundwork for us to make a serious, propel to where we need to be as a country. And you know, I'm excited because old Republicans are dying, and new ones are going to come in, and they're going to say, this is not the way, this is not who we are. Um, and I think there's going to be a lot of serious good change coming around. And it's people like you and people like Mike who start those conversations and say, where do we go next from here? Because we have to pass the baton eventually. So like I said, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to the next time you're willing to have me, and I'm excited for what's coming next. It's gonna be a good decade or two here coming around. So, and as far as social media, you just Julius Hernandez pretty much on everything. So don't go to my Twitter though. That's a mess. It's a mess. That Facebook is so.
Well, if you want to check out our show tonight, we're on YouTube. You can also check out our Facebook page, which is To an Imperfect Union. And anytime, if I don't call you and you want to call me, that's fine. And you have a great night, and I look forward to having you back on the show again. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Well, everyone, we have somewhat of a shortened version of a show tonight. Mr. Mr. Robert Williams and the Panthers aren't able to come on tonight, so we're going to kind of cut our show a little short. But I hope you enjoyed talking with the residents of Minneapolis, and I hope it gave you a little more insight into what is actually going on around the city. Have a good night, everyone. We hope to see you next Monday right here on the Political Consciousness of West Coast Steeler Fan, better known as To an Imperfect Union. Have a great night, everyone. See you next week.